All right, I think we will go ahead and get started at 6 o'clock. So I'll call to order the Election Commission meeting at 6 o'clock. And for the record, we have Tutu Malatu, Commissioner Tutu Malatu, Commissioner Robert Moody, Commissioner Terry Kish, and Commissioner Raphael Workman. And then I'm Kristen Rosenbaum, City Clerk. And also Tammy Yellico, City Attorney, and Thomas DePirio, Planner, and Glenda Lannis, Planning Manager. Okay. And so first, third on the agenda is audience participation. And so this is the time for anyone who wants to provide input on our responsibilities. Currently right now, the ward redistricting options can do that. We did receive email input that I provided everyone here, and so you can read that. And it looks like we have a few people who are online, so if there's anyone who wants to address the commission, right now, they can press the raise hand button, or if they're on a landline, they can press *9. So let me see if there's anyone who would like to. Right, it looks like Kevin Allen.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kevin Allen. I am a native of Thornton. I also testified before the State Congressional and Legislative Redistricting Commission 4 separate times, successfully advocating for keeping Thornton in its own separate Senate district. I graduated from Colorado School of Mines and am an engineer by trade. Do you need my address?
If you know what ward you live in, that would be helpful.
Okay, I am in Ward 4.
Okay, great.
I liked alternative number 2, especially since it put the reservoirs in Ward 1, which I think is a good idea. My only issue with the alternative was Precinct 105. It does divide Loma Linda neighborhood as specified in the comments. And so I believe that a good fix for this would be to swap Precinct 105 for Precinct 109, which is just to the south and west of 100th and York. Other than that, I also appreciate the combining and reforming of the Wood Glen neighborhood. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like we also have Wendy, who has raised her hand. So you should be able to unmute and talk now.
Yes, you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Wendy Engelmann. I currently live at 13885 Glencoe Street in Ward 3. However, I've been a Thornton resident in various wards for 50 years. In the last few years, I've been increasingly disappointed with the lack of leadership and direction within our city. Attending ward meetings, city council meetings, various other city events, I've witnessed very divided, contentious, and often downright hostile exchanges between representatives. Instead of moving together as a whole, the city of Thornton seems to be caught in a cycle of conflicting interests. Some folks are very concerned about new developments and the water rights required for such buildings. Other people want to invest in redeveloping those buildings that sit empty or have become blighted. Some folks are focused on oil and gas activities going on in their neighborhoods, while other residents are much more concerned about a lack of access to parks and recreational opportunities. The current ward districting map for Thornton only magnifies these conflicts. Sadly, the 5 proposals presented here this evening for redistricting do very little to address the ongoing and increasing divisions. All Thornton City Council members and the mayor should be equally concerned about the needs of all city residents. In order to facilitate this, ward boundaries should run north to south from 168th to 74th Avenue. This way, every leader would have a vested interest in both development and redevelopment, new and old, creating streets or maintaining them, low income or wealthy, trailer parks or McMansions. I am very disappointed that this committee and this process did not choose to address these issues. We are a large, diverse city with many needs. We should all be focused on the needs of a city as a whole. This ward map, as indeed much of the distribution of resources throughout our city, might be presented as preserving communities of interest, but in fact, it does not. It does not bring all people of all concerns to the table with equal voices. Maintaining our City of Thornton representation according to any of these wards continues and enhances the disparities between North and South, haves and have-nots, and may appear to include all stakeholders, but actually continues to leave power in the hands of a limited group with special interests. I am disappointed. As a city, a whole city, we can and must do better.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
looks like that was the last person who had their hand raised. If there's anyone else, last chance. All right, looks like no one else has raised their hand, and we do not have anyone in the audience. So we will go ahead and move on to action items. A is approval of the minutes for June 28th. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to take a look at those, and so I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, they are approved. And next on the agenda is the ward redistricting review and discussion of alternatives. And so I will go ahead and just turn it over to, I'm sorry, Glenda.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Glenda Lanus. I'm the Policy Planning Manager, and we've been working on the analysis of the alternatives and providing the Commission with information on them. And we've been working with GIS, who developed the maps. And together we provided the information for City Clerk's office to give to the Commission. And Thomas D'Imperio, who is the planner working on the project, is going to give the presentation.
Great, thanks, Glenda.
Hold on, sorry. Okay, should work now.
Perfect. So as has been previously mentioned, the purpose of this meeting is for us to present the various redistricting alternatives for review by the Election Commission. So we'll go through each alternative, entertain discussion, and then discuss next steps. So as a reminder, the considerations for the redistricting process, the alternatives must provide population equity in terms of number of residents across wards. The general standard has been that the percent difference between the largest ward and the smallest ward shall not exceed 10%. So each alternative does maintain that population equity requirement. Second is no minority vote dilution or political gerrymandering. No change shall exclude any council member from office before the expiration of the term for which the incumbent was elected. So in other words, the wards cannot shift in such a way that a council member now finds themselves living in a different ward than the one that they were elected to represent. The following one is more of a goal rather than a hard requirement, but it's to follow the county precinct boundaries to the maximum extent possible. The wards must be relatively compact as much as possible. The wards must be contiguous, and so no portion of a ward can be entirely separated from the rest of that ward. And preservation of communities of interest, and these can be communities that share similar interests in terms of culture, socioeconomic status, religion, race and ethnicity, and things like that. The notable community of interest in Thornton is the Hispanic Latino population, and no other geographically based communities of interest have been identified by staff. And this population is concentrated more in the southern part of the city, although there's no specific enclaves where the population is concentrated. So we'll move into the alternatives. And so the way that these slides are organized is that the map on the left-hand side is the current ward configuration that due to population shifts, we now need to redraw the ward district boundaries. So I've included it on each of the slides just so we can have a side-by-side comparison. So the only map that will be changing across the alternative slides is the one on the right. So right now we can see alternative 1. And then there are a few kind of housekeeping things that I want to address before we get into the actual analysis of each alternative. And that is, you might notice that the boundaries for Ward 4 are not proposed to change in any of the scenarios. And the boundaries for Ward 3, apart from a couple precincts, which I will identify in detail, the boundaries for Ward 3 do not change across any of the alternatives. So 1 through 5, the boundaries for Wards 3 and 4 will stay exactly as they are on the right-hand image. Ward 4 will not change from its current configuration. And then Precinct 137 in its entirety, which includes Skylake Ranch, Holly Point, and Knott's Landing subdivisions, will move from Ward 3 into Ward 2. And the northern half of Precinct 135, just to the south, will also move from Ward 3 into Ward 2. And this would reunite the Wood Glen subdivision entirely within Ward 2. The purpose for that is because the overwhelming majority of population growth in Thornton has occurred in Wards 3 and 4 since the last time redistricting was done.
Really?
Yes.
So I would have bet money on the opposite. I am surprised.
It's true. In terms of number of residential certificates of occupancy, it's quite stark, the difference. So therefore, the wards to the south do need to be reconfigured to help balance the population and meet the population equity requirement of 10% or less deviation. And so you might be wondering why Ward 3 was targeted for transferring a precinct and a half to a different ward and not Ward 4. We did look at different alternatives that would see a portion of Ward 4 moving into Ward 2. But given the population demographics and density, there was no configuration that allowed us to meet the population equity requirement and or the contiguity requirement. So it either resulted in a population deviation greater than 10%, which is unacceptable, or a portion of Ward 3 being non-contiguous with the rest of Ward 3, which is also unacceptable. So moving the Precinct 137 and the northern half of Precinct 135 helps us achieve population equity, contiguity, and reunites the Wood Glen subdivision. So, and again, that is true for all 5 scenarios. So moving forward, we'll look in detail at alternative 1. As you can see, other than precincts 137 and the northern half of 135 up to the north, the only change is that precinct 114, which includes the northern part of Thornton Valley East subdivision, the Villages North subdivision, and the Thornton Valley subdivision will move from Ward 2 into Ward 1. And this results in a relatively high degree of compactness for each of the 4 wards. And of course, all 4 wards maintain their contiguity. And so we'll move to the population breakdown. And so this chart shows the relationship for each ward based on the other wards. And so we'll look at the highest number here, and that reflects the biggest difference in percentage between the largest ward and the smallest ward. So for alternative 1, Ward 4 would be the largest with 36,403 residents, and Ward 3 would be the smallest with 34,332 for a population deviation of 5.84%. This is tied with 2 other alternatives for the lowest population deviation and is well below the 10% threshold required to meet the population equity requirement. So that is alternative 1. Do we want to open it up for questions after each one, or should we save questions for the end?
What's the pleasure of the commission?
Would it be okay if we just ask you questions as we go along?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Um,
By the way, appreciate all the hard work you guys have.
Yeah,
put
this
in.
is fantastic.
Oh, yeah, thank you guys.
Are there any questions so far?
I had one question.
Yes.
Looking at this map for alternative number one, Ward 2 appears, does that still meet the contiguous requirements? It seems rather tenuous, that little sliver that's connecting the bottom section of Ward 2 with the remainder of it in the north.
It does meet the contiguity requirements. It's kind of hard to see from this distance, but there is a sliver, I'm not sure what exact street that is, on to the southwest of Colorado Boulevard at 88th Avenue that allows for the contiguity.
Very well.
And once again, for example, in Ward 2, that white area is unincorporated Adams County. It's not annexed as part of the city, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And that reminds me, there are a few corrections on the slides and on the printed packets from the packet that you received last week. With respect to one of the council members' residences was shown in the wrong location. It is now in the correct location.
The hard copy, oh, yeah, let me give you a new copy so that you have that, sorry.
And then there is one other small correction on the map for alternative 3. One of the precincts that was labeled has the wrong label in the printed packet, but has been corrected for the presentation.
So what you're saying is that's correct and this is incorrect?
What I handed out to you is correct. The one that I emailed to you earlier was the incorrect, but it has also, for those that are listening online, has been corrected online as well. So what you're looking at online and on the Zoom call in front of you, in your packets, all of that should be good.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, sorry about that. So we can move on to alternative 2.
I have a question
Oh, yes.
on alternative 1, looking at population once again. So the reason we have for Ward 3, it is blank is because there has been little change? I don't understand.
Yeah, the majority of population growth in the last 10 years has occurred in either Ward 3 or Ward 4. And so population, in order to be equitable, needs to shift south, which is why Ward 1.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Can I make one comment too, Thomas? And just relevant to the comment online, these are only our first draft at alternatives for the Election Commission's consideration. So I just wanted to make that clear. There could be other alternatives that come out of that. And we can, if you would like us to, address the comments that you receive online.
Right.
So this is just a first draft for the Commission's consideration.
Hearing no other questions, I'll move on to alternative 2. So again, Ward 4 boundaries do not change. The boundaries for Ward 3 do not change from what I previously explained. So precincts 137 and the northern half of 135 move into Ward 2. Ward 1 would gain previously mentioned precinct 114 containing Thornton Valley East, and Villages North subdivisions. The portion of the city to the south of precinct 114 containing the Catalina apartments as well as Thornton Mobile Estates and the water storage ponds on the far southeastern portion of the city would move into Ward 1 from Ward 2. And precinct 105 would move into Ward 2 from Ward 1. This borders Interstate 25 and Washington Street and extends southward to Thornton Parkway. And this precinct is notable due to it splitting a portion of Loma Linda neighborhood from the remainder of the subdivision. And it would be, Loma Linda would be split across wards 1 and 2, and 23 homes within that subdivision would now find themselves in Ward 2, with the rest remaining in Ward 1. This also results in relatively lower degrees of compactness for wards 1 and 2, with Ward 1 oriented more horizontally east to west, and Ward 2 extending westward to Interstate 25. You can look at the population breakdown here, again focusing on the largest number in the table, which in this case is 9.32%, which is the population deviation between Ward 1, which in alternative 2 would be the largest at 37,205 residents, and Ward 2 being the smallest at 33,899 for a population deviation of 9.32%. This is the alternative that has the highest population deviation between the largest and smallest wards, but still falls below the 10% threshold. Are there any questions about alternative 2? Hearing none, I'll move on to alternative 3. So again, wards 3 and 4 maintain the same boundaries as we've already seen with alternatives 1 and 2, with the only changes being in the southern 2 wards. This is the first of 3 alternatives that does see a county precinct being split into 2 different wards. That precinct is precinct 111, roughly in the bottom center of the map. In this alternative, the northern half would remain in Ward 2, and the southern half containing the Parkwood subdivision and a narrow strip of homes on the north side of original Thornton would move into Ward 1 from Ward 2. This would also see the Precinct 116 on the far southeastern corner of the city move into Ward 1 from Ward 2, which contains the original Thornton at 88th Station area, which is currently undeveloped, the Catalina Apartments, and Thornton Mobile Estates subdivision. We can look at the population breakdown here. This is one of the 3 that are tied for the lowest at 5.84%. Again, with Ward 4 being the largest at 36,403 residents, with Ward 3 being the smallest at 34,332 for a deviation of 5.84%. Are there any questions about alternative 3?
1 second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hearing none, I'll move forward to alternative 4. Again, wards 3 and 4 maintain the same configuration that we've seen previously. Alternative 4 does include precinct 105, that is bordered by Interstate 25 to the west, Washington Street to the east, and Thornton Parkway to the south, moving into Ward 2 from Ward 1. This is the precinct that would see Loma Linda partially split into 2 different wards. This would also see precincts 110 and 111 move into Ward 1 from Ward 2. And when this is another scenario where a precinct is split, again, it's the same precinct that was split in the previous alternative, precinct 111. But in alternative 4, the southern half containing the Parkwood subdivision would remain in Ward 2, with the northern half moving into Ward 1, along with precinct 110 to the west. This does result in a relatively high degree of compactness for Ward 1, with a lower degree of compactness for Ward 2 as it extends westward to Interstate 25 and maintains ward contiguity. And looking at the population breakdown, this results in the second highest population deviation between the largest and smallest wards, with Ward 1 being the largest at 37,151 residents, and Ward 2 being the smallest at 33,953, for a total deviation of 9.02%, which is still below the 10% threshold, but as I mentioned before, it is the second highest. Are there any questions about alternative 4? Hearing none, I will move to the 5th and final alternative that will be presented tonight.
I'm sorry, did you say that 110 and 111 is split.
Only 111 is split in this scenario.
Okay.
I misspoke earlier. So 110 moves in its entirety from Ward 2 to Ward 1, and 111 would be split again along the same boundary that it's split in other scenarios, which is Thornton Parkway. In this case, the area to the northeast of Precinct 111 would move into Ward 1, with the southern half staying in Ward 2.
Thank you.
And last but not least is alternative 5. Again, wards 3 and 4 maintain the same configuration that we've seen previously. Alternative 5 does include precinct 105 to the west, moving into Ward 2 from Ward 1, splitting a portion of Loma Linda neighborhood. It would also see precinct 110 move into Ward 1 from Ward 2, which contains the York Highlands subdivision. And then, as in the previous two alternatives, precinct 111 is again split at Thornton Parkway, this time with the southern half containing the Parkwood subdivision would move into Ward 1, with the northern portion remaining in Ward 2. This alternative results in the greatest degree of compactness for Ward 1, but a lower degree of compactness for Ward 2 as it extends out to the west to Interstate 25, but does maintain ward contiguity. And in looking at the population breakdown, this is the third of 3 alternatives that is tied for the lowest population deviation between the largest ward, Ward 4, and the smallest, Ward 3, which again is 5.84%. And that is the last ward. The next slide is just all of the population breakdowns on one slide, so they can be easily compared, but I'm happy to return to any previous slide if there's any questions about any of the alternatives. Thank you.
Right. Any questions before we get into our discussions? All right, then I would open the floor to whoever would like to start with any discussions. And Thomas, if you would just kind of navigate back and forth to the maps, that would be great. Thank you.
Go back to the beginning here, just so we can start from the beginning.
So I have a few questions about and sort of a proposal. I emailed it to you. Did you get it yet?
So I saw your email. You had asked how many residents were in the different.
Yes. So I'll hold up my iPad. If we can get it on screen, that's fine. But it was a very late email. I didn't give Madam Chairman much time on that. But my question was regarding alternative 2. They're the very northwest corner of 2. I was wondering how much population is in there, so that we could consider some of a few things. So I don't know if you can see that. That was one of my questions. Was how much population is in that little corner?
So just looking at the map and the precinct numbers, just doing a little adding myself, so the calculation may be a little bit off, but it's around 9,229 population in that area that you've circled right there. It's highly,
That is
highly
a lot.
dense.
Okay. So the second one was the very lower right, southeast section of Ward 2 was my other question, was how many people might be in there?
And that one is 3,531. Again, that was just calculating it really quick, so my math could be a little bit off.
9 minus 3 is 6. That's still a lot. And then these other 2 in the middle there. Did you get a chance?
729 for that little section right there, and
Okay.
then 2004 for the section all the way to the right. This one right there. Yep.
Can we
Okay.
show that to the whole commission, or you were gonna do that, huh? Yeah.
Yeah,
So I can pass this around so that everybody can
I
take
see.
a look,
Okay.
and that is just, like I said, my rough numbers of those little sections there.
so as that's going around, I'll kind of explain. Last week I had couple weeks ago, last meeting, I had an idea for contiguity and compactness that potentially we could have 4 little rectangles, that might be a way to preserve the Hispanic population in the South so that they have a strong voting bloc still, and make, as close to little ovals or as we can. And so these, number 2 looks kind of like that, and there's just a few little adjustments. And I realized that there's a council person there, which might be why it's, kind of like that. But I wanted to basically see if that's even possible to say something like, what if Thornton Parkway was the boundary, or something along those lines. And so I didn't have a lot of time to do too much other than just wonder about those numbers. But that was just a thought. I remember we had said something like, if the ratification or the stamp of approval is at a certain date, then the council people's addresses may or may not be impacted, or that requirement may not be, anyway.
Right, you can't
Yeah.
change a ward to eliminate a sitting city council member.
Yes.
Right, so if somebody's already elected, you can't cut them out of the ward they were elected in through
Yes.
this process, right?
Correct. So yes, I do understand that part. The other thing I kind of wanted to mention as we're going is, there is, the suggestion of a bunch of up and down slivers seems to me to be impossible on the far left without breaking contiguity. And it seems to be, if the very lower concentration is Hispanic, then north and south splits would be almost definitionally disenfranchising them, because then they're very diluted.
Each ward
Seems-
would break up the Hispanic population.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
then theoretically it could be like, 10, 20, whatever smaller percent in each ward, and then just like a huge percent, if that's how, I don't know exactly how it is, but it sounded like that's how that was said. So that was just another thought, is that,
And I wondered on that issue, Commission member, if you wanted staff to put some time on that, just so that we address the caller's question, because I bet, these questions will come up with city council too, so.
It might be worthwhile, but I think that you're right, that the preservation of communities of interest is something that we have to take into consideration. I believe, it looks like, I think you're right, end up diluting votes by cutting
By
out
the
that community of
vacant
interest.
place there in the middle, huh?
For the sake of addressing the caller, maybe it's worthwhile to do so, to look into it, but I think that you're probably right with your analysis on that.
so the thing that I do think we can take from that is, what if we look at the different political struggles that were mentioned in that call? Something about growth, and something about rehabilitation or renovation, like all the different, business or whatever, all that stuff that was mentioned. And perhaps we could see if there is a way to address the concern without doing the exact up and down, but maybe we can get to the heart of it and find another way. I don't know, because I don't know how far left and right or north and south are those political ambitions or goals or
It seemed
whatever.
like one of the caller's concerns was socioeconomic status too, between the various wards. I think it'd
Yes.
be worth just putting some time at it, if guys could, unless you have comments here tonight too.
The comment that I would have would be that one, as you mentioned, it would be very difficult to maintain contiguity with the portion of Thornton that exists west of Interstate 25. To do a configuration like that and maintain contiguity, it would have to snake around the North Glen boundaries and provide some type of connection to that portion, which would not be a clear delineation north to south, and so the map would get quite messy.
Yep.
In that sense. And even if the rest of the population concerns were addressed, it might also have the appearance of being gerrymandered due to that configuration. And then my other comment would be with respect to minority voting populations and avoidance of political gerrymandering. There's two forms of gerrymandering, and both we were trying to avoid with these alternatives. And one would be effectively diluting the minority vote that exists in Thornton so that no ward has a significant population of voters belonging to that minority group, and therefore lowering their political power. And the second would be condensing that community all into one ward, whereas right now there's an outright majority of Hispanic Latino population in Ward 1 and a very significant percentage in Ward 2 that we have strived to maintain to keep those proportions rather than configuring the wards so that the Hispanic Latino population is not entirely condensed in one ward.
I appreciate that comment because I forgot. I think that's called packing.
Exactly. Cracking and packing are the two.
So I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but now that you mention it, that was one of my main goals, is to maintain power, but I didn't realize that there's two major sections and that would end up packing. So that gives me a lot more to consider. I thank you very much for bringing that up.
Of course.
To that extent, would we still draw it up or not? I mean, it's up to the commission.
I think.
I
if
know
you're
the
talking-
question will come up.
Well, I think you're talking about having to snake the boundary around in order to maintain continuity, basically including the western portion of Ward 4 and coming all the way around. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have a council member sitting there on, what is that, in between 104th and 108th, just off of Colorado. It looks like they would be cut out of Ward 2 and redistricted into Ward 1. So that probably wouldn't work even if we wanted to try and look at that.
Yeah, I think given the constraints, I don't know that there exists a north-south configuration that would, provide the outcomes that the community member expressed desire to see, while also meeting the rest of the criteria.
Yeah, we had problems last time with that too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to wrap up my mind. I felt like this is my first time doing this. So I felt like we're just shuffling 1 and 2. And I'm gonna agree with the caller. It's like, I think 1 and 2 is not growing. And I think I keep hearing the minority vote. But if it's not moving things, what is the whole point of moving numbers 1 and 2? And understand too with the continuity, like, is there any other way beside just shuffling things 1 and 2?
Yeah, so the difficulty arises in just where population growth has occurred in the city. So I mentioned at the start that the overwhelming majority, like over 80% of residential housing growth in Thornton in the last 10 years has occurred in wards 3 and 4. So the population has grown quite significantly, with over 80% of that occurring in wards 3 and 4. And so population, the southern wards need to absorb some areas from the north. And given the way that the city boundary is configured, the only options are really to, for lack of a better word, kind of shuffle areas across the wards to maintain the population equity.
Has to push up.
Yeah.
because we're getting more people north.
I got that.
And one of the reasons many years ago why we did 3 and 4, because it used to be horizontal rather than vertical, was to absorb future population growth in those areas that we could move, this way. For example, Colorado Boulevard, move it this way and still stay within some precinct boundaries, as well as north and south if needed to. And so it's just background perspective of why it lays out like this. So what I hear you saying then is that the alternatives that would give us the least amount of population deviation, I believe, was 1 and 1 and 3?
Let me go to, it might be a little hard to see, but whoops. This slide here shows the population charts for each one. So alternatives 1, 3, and 5 are all tied for the lowest at 5.84%.
And then on the issue of minority vote dilution, how do those compare, Thomas? Can you say that?
I don't have that chart on the slide, but we did do a comparison across the different wards. And there are various changes, none of which are statistically significant. So in, I believe, every scenario, Ward 1 would lose a slight amount of population identifying as Hispanic Latino, with the larger differences occurring in Ward 2. The largest difference in Ward 2 would be in alternative 4, with Ward 2 losing 2.4% percentage points of Hispanic Latino population. So again, it's not statistically significant. There's nothing large, not even over 5%, certainly not over 10%, anything that would cause concern over the preservation of minority vote. And the proportion between the wards, we tried to keep that as similar to the current population breakdowns as possible.
I had a question on alternatives 2 and 4. You had mentioned the split neighborhood in District 105 there, the Loma Linda neighborhood. You had obviously taken that into consideration in each of these instances. You brought it up specifically. Why is that particular neighborhood being split? Why is it not being kept whole?
So the reason it's split in this alternative is because by and large, whenever we shifted population from one ward to another in using the software for the redistricting purposes that breaks down population and things like that, we try to do it by district or by whole district, or county precincts, to better achieve the goal of keeping the county precincts intact. Of course, some scenarios we weren't able to do that, and resulted in one precinct being split. But the way that the county precinct boundaries are drawn for precinct 105 are kind of peculiar in that the precinct boundary is along Logan Street, which contains homes on both sides, and that's why it's split.
You also have District 111 being split in 3 different scenarios. Why is that one not being kept whole in any of your options here?
So 111 is only proposed to be split in alternatives 3, 4, and 5.
Correct.
But in alternatives 1 and 2, it is kept whole.
Is it simply population?
I believe so, and the way it worked out, and to give multiple different alternatives, there's really no way to balance everything while keeping county precincts intact and when looking at different configurations.
Well, very good. We've only had to split one county precinct. I know in past years, it's a juggling game sometimes, you know, trying to move boundaries, and it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it is notable that in all 5, we are reuniting precinct, I believe it's 135, which would not only reunite that precinct within one ward, but it'll reunite the Wood Glen subdivision
Yes.
too, which is split.
Yep. I think it's important. Do we want to maybe, you know, eliminate our one we like the least, maybe? We want further, I'm just throwing ideas out.
Are there any other kind of alternatives that you would like us to take a look at that could work? Or do you want to start trying to whittle down one of these options? Or one of these options with a little change?
I think these are pretty decent options personally. I think they're all fairly similar. I don't know if there's anything else others are going to look at that's something drastically different.
Well, in looking at the population, especially in Ward 1, look, I really like knowing the neighborhoods down there. I really like what we've done with a couple of the alternatives, and keeping it compact. I mean, Ward 1, that 118 or 116 neighborhood is it's always been one that we have looked at, I believe, in the past. I just like, well, I'll withhold my comments.
So are there any other concepts or alternatives that the commission would like to look at other than what's here?
I don't know. I think I'm just gonna go with the person who called about social economy. It's not really changing the redistricting this part. I feel like, is there any different way we can look at this? I feel like they're all the same to me. I have to be honest with you, ain't changing that. And I think I keep hearing the Hispanic population voting. There's something else we can focus on too, beside, yes, we're keeping their vote, but there's more than that too. For the next 10 years, they have to deal with, or that community. Especially with growth that's now moving as fast. I want to kind of consider that as well, beside keeping the Hispanic community together. Like, I don't know.
So you're looking at thinking you want to expand Ward 1 and make it larger to compensate for the additional growth that's going to happen in 3 and 4 down the line?
Something like that.
I think the guidelines would tell us we can't try and anticipate future growth. You know, that's not the point of this. We have to base this on the census and the existing communities and population between the wards. So that wouldn't work. I wouldn't say you would base one on potential future growth. But, you know, if you want us to take a look at if we have a method of doing that, socioeconomic issues between wards, I mean, we could try another configuration that might address that, right?
We could look into it, certainly. We'd have to fire up the redistricting software, which of course is definitely doable, and we could get new configurations. But with the requirements for contiguity and compactness, there's only so much that we can really do, and most of those different scenarios would still just involve kind of shuffling things between wards 1 and ward 2. But we can of course look at and see if there's other configurations that might be possible. I will also say that the communities of interest guidelines, it's not just about race and ethnicity. It also includes provisions for like religious groups, cultures, socioeconomic status. But in looking at things like that, there's not really geographic-based communities of interest other than the Hispanic Latino population. And based on the community profile that was done through the comprehensive planning process that was adopted in 2020, it shows that there's a significant overlap in terms of geographic locations of Hispanic Latino population and concentrations of poverty. So while that is a community of interest per the guidelines, given the overlap, a lot of those areas would be very similar, and so the configurations would still be the same.
Right. So the principle is you can't bust up the Latino community in different wards based on socioeconomic desires when you're doing this. So, right.
And we need to be careful with that. So, because they may look up. The perception, for example, may be, oh, you're trying to put all the Hispanics into one ward. That's why
I
you're
think
drawing
that's the
this up.
perception of the column.
Yeah,
Right?
and I think we need to be really careful with that. I think we need to be aware of that, but not make that one of our main criteria. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And in Thornton, the 2020 census had, the 2020 census is looking at south of 104th is about half. Half of those people consider themselves Latino or Hispanic. And throughout the whole city, it's about a third. So that's kind of the amount that this particular population is really focused down south. But because of the configuration of the city, it's really difficult to find many alternatives, as you mentioned, because we've got the amount on the west side, and you can't really, it's hard to join that with another ward, because you really need to have contiguity across I-25, and then within original Thornton, it's really, it's unfortunate, but there's very few changes that can be made in the end. It's shifting a couple of neighborhoods here, it's just the geography of it. And there is, of course, the overlap of the socioeconomic and the community of interest being Hispanic, Latino. In the South, certainly, there are some neighborhoods that could be kept together for the socioeconomic reason as well. So there's a bit of an overlap there. So just the way that it's laid out, we don't have that many alternatives, even though I do understand what you mean. It's just the configuration is really difficult. I mean, looking at individual neighborhoods more within the Ward 1 and Ward 2 boundaries, that's kind of where it's all happening.
But having said that, I think we should address the caller's concerns and your concerns in writing next time for you, so we'll lay it out. And if there is an alternative that even approximates the other guidelines in terms of what we're constrained by in terms of population per ward and minority dilution, we can bring that alternative back. Right. But there are a number of guidelines we gotta try and meet in this process, so yeah. But let us, yeah, I think we can noodle it a bit at least and put some thoughts back on the record here about that.
So my least favorites are 2 and 4 because it's too much on Ward 1 with the number of population being there. So that's my least that I would not consider.
So there's 2,
2 and 4.
and then here's 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, before we continue, is everyone good with going back and taking a look at some other options, as you mentioned? Okay, and then do we want to continue with looking at these options or wait to see the additional option at our next meeting?
Well, we can't decide on the one we like without seeing all the options, but I think we would probably decide on a few we don't like.
Okay,
What were you saying? Which ones did you not like?
Oh, I already said 2 and 4.
2 and 4.
It's just a reason as Ward 1 in both places is too high for me. As it is, it's kind of a dense neighborhood that we need to kind of put in perspective that too.
And alternative 4 gives us the highest deviation, which is still within, our boundaries. Yeah, yeah. But
Alternative 4 would be the second highest after alternative 2. But yeah, both were within the 10% deviation.
okay. Yeah, I would have no problems with those.
So, is one of the potential solutions we're looking at for next meeting, is that possibly the one that I mentioned? Because it's based off of number 2, but slightly different with a few changes, like the one we just passed around.
so I think if you're looking to include all of these parts within Ward 1, that's going to put the population over.
Yeah, I was thinking more like this is Ward 2 now. I know, that's, so drawing the line this way, so this goes down to Ward 1 and this goes up to Ward 2. So, yeah, roughly,
Okay,
yeah,
these would be wards 1 and these would be wards 2. Okay,
yeah.
does everyone see what he's talking about? Is this an option that you would like to take into consideration? So it would be putting these 2 sections, let's see. These 2 sections into Ward 2 and these 2 sections into Ward 1. And I'm not sure, we'd have to run the numbers on the population and see if that would work. But that is.
But potentially that could make Ward 1 smaller and then
Wow.
potentially not so much of a gap.
Mhm.
But I don't know.
Yeah, we'd have to put it into the redistricting software and get the population reports, but that's something that would be doable.
I'm just concerned it may not be along precinct boundaries, that's my concern.
Those
These
2
two
where?
into
Yeah,
Ward
so-
2, and these 2 into Ward
Number 2 is my favorite,
1.
and that's, but
This.
those differences
Yes.
would make it,
There's something else.
And then
like, I would enjoy that more. It seems more compact that way.
Ward 1.
But with a council member there, that may just completely
So-
eliminate that as
Yeah,
a
he wanted to
possibility.
use 2, 2.
And so,
That would be Ward 1, so yeah, 1.
And there's
Oh,
2.
unless there was somebody to.
But isn't
draw
gonna change
around
the-
it.
That would
Whatever,
change
but-
2 council
Yeah.
members.
Yeah.
into a different
I don't think there'd be a way to do that without splitting one or more precincts. but,
Right.
which again is a goal, not a requirement, but
But whenever possible.
I'm sorry?
But whenever possible, we like to keep.
Of course, yeah,
lines.
yeah.
So what's the verdict? We could run,
So it looks like it would put
That
2
concept,
council members
yeah.
into a different ward.
Yeah.
Who did that, so I don't think that would.
Good thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
So consensus to not move forward with
Yeah,
this one,
yeah, if
but
it's-
to look at some other alternative that takes into consideration
Yeah.
socioeconomic. And then what is the consensus on alternatives 2 and 4? Do we want to eliminate those or wait?
I'm okay eliminating 4.
Yeah, me too.
Get rid of 4.
Get rid of 4? Okay. And what's the consensus on 2?
Yeah, let's keep 2 at least,
I want to keep it
so
for
we
now.
can look at
I
it.
don't like it.
I don't either.
What's your concerns?
With the number on Ward 1, it's just,
No, alternative 2. What's your concern
that's my concern.
with Ward 1 being
Yeah, the population,
population being
much
Uh,
higher.
At the 9.32% more than Ward 2.
Yeah.
I also don't like the splitting in the neighborhood.
you talking about precinct 105?
Yeah, correct. There's also the email concern that we had when we walked in, talking about not wanting to cut off the southern tip of Ward 2 and redistrict that.
Yeah, when I was considering the email of this and the tip of Ward 2, in my mind, I was looking at the alternatives that include that in Ward 1 as preferable, but I can be persuaded otherwise. So that was one of the main reasons I liked 2. So 3 has that same potential.
Any other comments about alternative 2?
I can live with if we want to eliminate that one. I don't have a problem. Just for the sake of trying to narrow it down.
Are there any
Good point.
others that someone would like to propose to eliminate?
I think, Kristen, just for the purposes of a record, we should probably take a vote on each of those, the
Okay.
elimination of each of those options.
Okay.
And that way you can be on the record with your concerns and your vote, for sure.
So I would take a motion on alternative 2. Would someone like to make a motion to
I'd like a
eliminate?
motion to eliminate alternative number 2.
And is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed?
Nay.
Okay,
And you can note the commissioner's comments too, that we had in discussion.
and I would take a motion on alternative 4.
I'll take a motion to eliminate number 4.
Okay,
Second.
and, all right, has been moved and seconded. And we'll note the discussion from before. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we have eliminated options 2 and 4. Right, are there any others that a member would like to make a motion on?
I would like to digest it, the rest of them.
Yeah.
All right, so we are left with alternatives 1, 3, and 5, and then we'll look at the other options.
Ramel, you mentioned earlier about where we only can go vertical. Is that what it is? Or,
No, the suggestion was to do vertical.
yeah. So,
Go,
Yeah.
everything go north and south, and that's real difficult.
So that was a suggestion, and we did go over at the meeting last time, that there are certain guidelines that we have to follow. And the first one is the deviation in population, and that's why we showed that. Not more than 10% is generally the guideline. The second one is minority vote dilution, and we have to watch that in terms of what is the population now between the wards. We have to try not to deviate from that in as less a percentage as we can. The other one, these are guidelines from the law, but again, note guidelines, not absolute regulation. The next one is precinct boundary coordination, and that's what we were talking about, that they be coordinated as to the extent possible with the county precinct boundaries. And then the three more, compactness, meaning they have to be as compact as possible and not spread out over the entire jurisdiction. And contiguity, they have to touch, the boundaries have to touch between the wards. And finally, preservation of communities of interest. And so one notable community is, again, the Hispanic Latino population. But others, as the caller mentioned, and as we discussed last time, are ethnicity, cultural centers of population, socioeconomic status within wards. So there's a number of communities of interest that the staff has also considered. And that's why you have the text you do after each one of these alternatives. They try to talk about, they do talk about the deviation in population, minority vote, dilution, again, boundaries, compactness, contiguity, and communities of interest.
so that's why north-south doesn't work.
It is it's probably gonna be a big reason why it doesn't work, because not all the guidelines can be met in terms of population deviation, minority vote dilution, given that there is such a high concentration in Ward 1 of our main minority there, and then,
But if it's still going up and down, still 1 and 2, you still have it in the same pocket though, wouldn't they?
well, I'm not sure what that,
Not when you consider the other factors. Otherwise, they would have given us a scenario.
So I have a
On
question.
that,
Can
right?
I go point at the?
sure.
So when I was imagining the caller, I was imagining something like, this is one,
That's
this
exactly
is
what I'm
two,
thinking.
like that, but then I was worried about these aren't touching anymore.
We're not continuous.
That's one of the, so that was the thing that made me think.
Right, you have to
It's
try
not.
and equal out all the guidelines, right? It's not just that, but that's a good point. It's gonna be
So
difficult.
if you do the snake thing, can it be connected?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, you could, but I'm not sure that a configuration like that would satisfy the rest of the requirements, and it would have to be creatively drawn so that the count, because one of the other considerations that it is a sitting council member cannot be put into a different ward, and so that's also another consideration, especially with council member right in between Colorado Boulevard and I'm not sure what that street is to the west, but that kind of triangle portion where North Glen meets 104th at the north. So
Yeah, and then the way Thornton is configured, you got that tiny little skinny piece there between 112th and 104th, and I don't think you could fit 4 wards coming down in that narrow section there, because you definitely would have to split quite a few precincts. And I'm not quite sure how you would even split that into 4 north-south pieces. So that would be very, very difficult to do, because it's so narrow there. I mean, if North Glen wasn't there, we, quickly annexed part of North Glen. But they have got that big chunk in there, and we're left with that narrow little neck, and it's difficult to try and do 4 north-south.
It's definitely something we could bring some thought back for them, right? In some shape or form. I don't know if you're gonna draw a map, but some thoughts as to the breakdown there.
Yeah.
We can look at the socioeconomic aspects and see how they pan out with the map.
Yeah, that would be good. Where would you draw that information from, the socioeconomic?
Well, we need to look and see what the census has, the 2020 census, what information they have about socioeconomic groups. And I'm not sure if there'd be enough time, but to somehow try and see, maybe the software has that ability, but to kind of see where those would be focused. I don't know what GIS can do, but I'm just kind of speaking for them. It's possible they were able to do something with the Hispanic Latino population per precinct, so maybe they can do it with some other types of census information, if that has been released so far for the whole city. I'm not quite sure if that detailed information has been released on the socioeconomic.
I don't think it has.
You don't think it has?
As of, I believe, 3 weeks ago, it still had not been released for 2020. It was American Community Survey estimates, which is not the official census.
If we can look whatever information we do have and see if we could make some general observations.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah,
To address the caller and the
Absolutely.
commission, yeah.
I'm not sure if we'd be able to practically do anything about it, but at least we'll know about it and we'll be able to kind of use it as part of the decision making. Well, you guys will be able to use it as part of the decision making.
So what would a motion look like?
I think it's to direct staff to consider the concerns on socioeconomic information in alternatives and address in writing maybe the concerns of the caller and the commissioner.
I'd like to make that motion.
And if we could provide a map, I mean, to show, because I think what everybody's saying is the deviations and meeting the other guidelines is going to be so difficult if we draw it up that way. So I'm not sure we can provide a map, but we could see.
And I would like to add to it, to look at the data, and in fact, if it varies a lot from what we have, or if one of the existing alternatives gives us that information, in that case, it doesn't need to be done, but at least I would like for the planning, the group to at least look at that. Does that make sense?
I think it does. Does it make sense to you, Linda and Thomas?
Yeah.
You're the ones. What would you like to provide? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
We'll see what information we can get on the socioeconomic status situation, and then we'll apply it to the alternatives and see if it makes any difference between the alternatives, or if there's some alternative we could put together. We can see what we can do. With the information we have, we're not sure how much information we do have on that, but we can see what we can do. We'll look at the existing ones as well in terms of those.
So that's your motion?
That's my motion.
All right. Is there a
Good luck with
second?
that.
I'm gonna be listening to that over and over. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Okay, all of those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we have our marching orders on that. Anything else on the discussion of these alternatives right now?
I just have we did have Kevin Allen who had a comment right at the very beginning. I don't know if you were going to.
Yeah,
You wanted to switch to them.
he said he liked number 2 and then wanted to switch 105 and 109.
So that was for alternative 2, which I think we have
We've
eliminated.
already- Yeah.
And so I don't know that I don't think there's a need to look into that unless someone wants to make a motion to look at something. Okay. All right, then item 5 is other matters. Are there any other matters? All right, item 6 is adjournment. All right, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second?
I'll second that.
Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned at 7:14 p.m.
Can you
Thank
say
you
when
all
the
very
next
much.
meeting is, Kristen?
And the next meeting will be the 27th
At 6 p.m.
at 6 p.m. in this room. And we will get the information on the website updated for that. And we will provide the packet to you. Do you think we can have information to provide by
We'll have a little bit more time, so hopefully.
Friday?
I think
before?
Friday, we would definitely want
Okay.
to provide. I can't speak for GIS, but I'm thinking that's a reasonable
Okay,
request.
And at the latest, it could be 24 hours in advance under the law to post.
right, yeah, but just to give everyone
But we
on
will
the
try to do
commission
it
to
in advance
have a
of
little
that.
bit of time to
Mhm.
review it before they get here. All right, good, thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.